Hey, it's Mario here, and in this video we're gonna go into how to keep track of your workouts. And you guys know I'm a big fan of tracking in general, of gathering as much data as possible in terms of diet and nutrition. I recommend using apps like MyFitnessPal to measure caloric intake, to measure your macronutrient ratios, and it's important to have enough data. If you want to make a good decision, you want to be objective as possible, you want to have that information. And when it comes to solving problems, I would say that even about half of the problems, about 50% of the time, you can solve just by gathering more data, and it's going to become obvious what the solution is. And I encounter this with a lot of people when I, let's say, interview people for my coaching program, or when I just talk to people in general. There's very little data. People are not investing much time into tracking and measuring their progress, and it's of course very, very hard to diagnose the problem because you don't know what's going on, especially when it comes to training. And this is a very, very crucial component of training, to be able to tell, well, how many sets am I doing for a particular muscle group per week? What's my 10 rep max on this exercise? Which exercise have I been doing in which order? And you would be surprised how often people don't even follow the prescribed repetition schemes in a program because simply there's a lack of tracking. So there's just an arbitrary amount of weight they pick for a certain day, and there's really no data to indicate, okay, is it moving forward? Is it going backward? What's happening here? So when it comes to tracking, I've done everything out there. So we're gonna start off with the simplest thing that I tried out when I first started out. That was simple pen and paper. You just buy a journal, any kind of journal, and you just get a pen and you write down the exercise, you write down the number of sets, you write down the reps and the weights. And that's a really cool method. I would say that there's a bunch of pros and cons. One big pro of this method is really that you don't bring your phone, you don't use your phone, and that can be very good if you're looking to focus, because phone can be quite distracting unless you put it on airplane mode, which is kind of what I do right now. So when you go to the gym, airplane mode, made that a habit. Airplane mode off is when you're exiting the gym, but inside of the gym, no distractions, no messaging, no social media, none of that. And with the pen and paper method, I think some very, very high level sports coaches, athletes still use that method. And some of my friends do at a very high level in physique sports are still using the pen and paper method, which is great. But the big con of that method is really backtracking and seeing where the progress has been made. So you don't really have a database you can search through very easily, and that makes the pen and paper method a little bit harder. And also, one big con is if you're traveling, that is a problem because you have to carry all these journals, and it can be also a little bit stressful and kind of hard to keep track of all of that. And you just have to write a lot, and I'm not really used to writing that much because I use computer most of the time. And I think that's most people nowadays. So pen and paper is really great, but I don't really recommend. That's not my preferred method of tracking. The second method that I've kind of switched to and moved on from a pen and paper was a spreadsheet. So I use spreadsheets as Google Sheets that are synchronized with the Google Cloud, or if you have an iCloud, if you're in the Apple system, you can easily do that, and it's kind of synchronized across all of your devices. You can edit that on your PC. You can even use the calculators. And that's one big benefit of Excel sheets, because you can calculate the total volume, you can calculate the weight over time, you can calculate all these things, and it can be very, very easy to organize. If you know you're around Excel, if you know a little bit of formulas, you can make a really solid tracking system. And I've actually been using that for years and years until mobile phones become a little bit more smarter, and now these apps are much better, which we're going to go into. So one thing with the Excel, and that's a big issue, is that it can get really bulky in terms of there's a lot of data. There's not a lot of data that you can practically use, and sometimes you have to really go back and back like months and months, and then you can see and find, okay, this is the piece of information I was looking for. Let's say the amount of volume I was doing for my last cut on squats, right? So you have to really go back, and you have to organize it from the get-go in a really good systematic way, where it's like per month or per week. The way I did it was basically I created a folder, let's say year 2014, that I had a folder, and then I have like January, February, and then I just had all those sheets, and then inside of the sheets I had tabs for every single week. And it was pretty good organization, but again, you can't search through all of them, so you can't really go back and find how your squat progressed over time. You could probably pull the data out if you're really experienced with coding, but I'm not that good in terms of that, so I didn't really like that method too much, so I upgraded from there. I upgraded to using a mobile app. So currently I'm using an Android app called FitNotes, and that's one thing that I recommend is using a mobile app if you have, let's say, everybody has a smartphone right now. So for Android, I would recommend using a FitNotes app, and for iOS, for the Apple system, there's an app called Strong. So they're both very, very similar. They both offer this very, very similar functionality. And what's really good about the app is that, let's say you're tracking inside of the gym, you're doing a set, and then the app will notify you if you hit a PR. Let's say let's say you're doing leg extensions, and I don't know, you're doing like 135 pounds, and all of a sudden you did like, I don't know, 14 reps, and usually you did only 13 reps, and now all of a sudden you hit a PR. You didn't even know, that, I don't know, 5 weeks ago you managed to come close, but you never managed to surpass that 14 rep, right? So it's really interesting to have that data, and it's kind of motivating as well, because you're tracking the gym and it's instantly it says, oh yeah, it's a PR. And as well as, often what these apps offer is you can export the data if you need it, or even view it on the web. A Fitness app doesn't have that yet, but I think they're working on it. And I use it personally as well to check, let's say, how much I've hit last week for how many reps, and then I can try to progress this week, because you can easily just check last week's data on the phone. Okay, I did this much weight for this amount of reps, and then I've hit a lot of good reps. Okay, let's try to do this. And you can also add notes, how you felt, as well as check your total volume that you did across months, and how your squats, let's say, progressed over a course of a year, which is really cool data to know that your program is really getting the job done. Because a lot of people that are training in the gym, they're not measuring their progress, and often they're going to say, well, shit, man, I'm not making any progress. Maybe you are. Like, you would be surprised how many people are just not tracking. They're probably making progress, but they don't even know what they're doing. And how are you going to be able to diagnose a problem if you can't tell what's the current situation? So I'd really, really urge you to jump on these apps and start using them. I'll be putting all the links in the description below for these mobile apps. And if you haven't been doing this before, of course, there's going to be a certain barrier to get used to it, to make it a habit. And that's something that, with any habit, no matter how tiny it is, there's always going to be a little bit of that, activation energy required, to start the fire, quote unquote. And that's the same thing with tracking your workouts. But I can tell you, it's going to pay off. It's going to pay off in the long run a lot. You're going to have a higher level of self-awareness. You're going to know what's going on. As well as, the only thing I don't like about the mobile apps, I have to point attention to this, is that it can often get distracting if you have your phone, if you have your Wi-Fi, if you have your 3G on, or whatever you're using. It can get distracting if you're getting all these messages, you're being hit up all the time. So I'd highly urge you to use the airplane mode, kind of detach a little bit from the world and really zone in on your training when you're doing training. That's gonna also skyrocket your results to avoid those distractions in the gym. And that's the only kind of mobile apps that I would say that is really a big one. Of course, someone will say, well, I don't like to use my phone at all, or if you're living in some kind of environment where it's really not a good idea to bring your phone around. I don't know where that could be, but again, that's my preferred method of tracking my workouts right now, and it's been very, very rewarding. I can see exactly what I'm doing and where I'm progressing. So that is my recommendation for you guys as well. So let me know in the comments below. Actually, I'm curious, what are you using currently to track your workouts? And if you're not tracking your workouts, just let me know. Just let me know, hey, man, I'm not tracking my workouts. It's fine. It's cool. But I will start tracking my workouts. So just let me know in the comments below. Aside from that, make sure to hit that subscribe button below to support the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.